Buddhism in Japan has a history of over 1400 years. It first arrived from China and Korea in the 6th century. At first, it was more of a religion for the nobility, and over time, Buddhism spread beyond the court. However, it wasn't until the Kamakura period, around the 13th century, that Buddhism became more widely practiced by the common people. But after the Meiji Restoration in the late 19th century, Japan began shifting towards Shintoism. The government promoted Shinto as the state religion and implemented anti-Buddhist policies called Haibutsukushaku, leading to the destruction of numerous Buddhist temples. Later, Buddhism adapted and reformed. Most Japanese people today practice both Buddhism and Shinto, blending elements of both traditions into their daily lives. So that concludes my trip, my first day here in Tokyo. This is my second time actually in Japan. I came to Kyoto last summer. I was in Kyoto just visiting temples and museums, just doing research about Japanese society, Japanese culture during the Heian period. I have been traveling pretty often for the past couple years, but the purpose of my travels have always been for fun. Like for sightseeing, for photography, for food, for pleasure. And I feel like I've grown out of that phase. I feel like traveling isn't supposed to be about indulging in your senses. It's about something else, something more. And this is what all this is about, this Buddhist pilgrimage that I'm taking. You could say that I'm on a journey towards self-discovery, and I hope that traveling to countries that are predominantly Buddhist would open my eyes and help me see reality more clearly. Tomorrow, I'm heading to Mount Fuji, the iconic mountain that everybody's raving about. It's just a 2-hour train ride from Shinjuku Station, actually. So it's quite doable. I don't think any trip to Japan is complete without visiting Mount Fuji. But also, I've been reading some interesting stuff about Mount Fuji. So yeah, I'm interested to see where it all leads, and I can't wait to see what I'm going to discover tomorrow. I did not know this, but Mount Fuji is actually a volcano. And I believe it erupted, I think like in 1707, I believe. And it's been a while since it last erupted. But I do remember that it erupted 9 times between 781 and 1083. And I mean, it comes as no surprise that the locals would consider this mountain very sacred. And, because of its eruptions, they would associate this volcano with a fire deity. And what's interesting about Mount Fuji is that in the past, like centuries ago, there used to be this esoteric Buddhist sect that thrived on the mountain. And basically they were just like practitioners that practiced severe austerities and rituals. So they would recite sutras under waterfalls and would maintain strict diets. And they would just climb this mountain to just be free and, just to attain enlightenment in a way. And the mountain, basically the water from that mountain is quite interesting because the locals regard it as quite sacred. Because back in those days, before people climbed that mountain, they would just use the spring water that flows down the mountain and use it for purification practices or purposes. So they would go through these like rites and rituals and to purify themselves before they went on that mountain, basically. All right, so the summit of Mount Fuji actually looks like a lotus flower. And basically the outer rims of that peak has these petals, I would say. So these are just like irregular peaks like around that crater. And these petals are home to the shrines of various Buddhist deities and Shinto deities. And what's even more interesting is that in the middle of that crater, people believe, or Buddhists believe, that it's the home of the Bodhisattva Sengen, or they also call it Asamanukami, who is actually an avatar of the primordial Buddha called Virochana, who is a principal Buddha in Vajrayana Buddhism. And basically, people believe that he is enshrined at the bottom of that crater. So pilgrims who ascend the mountain, they would just travel clockwise around the crater, and they would pay reverence to these sculptures and shrines that are scattered across the peaks. So this is Enkaku, one of the most prominent Zen Buddhist temples here in Kamakura. And the reason why I'm here is because of Zen. Zen, to me, is quite interesting because, so basically, people who practice that branch of Buddhism, they would practice something called zazen, which is just seated meditation. But basically, practitioners of zazen, they would just sit, and they would sit in a cross-legged position, or like a lotus and half lotus position, and then they would just breathe, and they would just observe their thoughts without any attachment. The idea here is to just transcend the ego and dualistic thinking, basically. And zazen is very interesting because it shares a lot of similarities with anapanasati, or breath meditation, or vipassana, insight meditation, which are two very central meditation techniques in the Theravada tradition. And also, what's even more interesting is that zazen was quite popular with the samurai back in the days. So the warrior class, they had to cultivate these qualities, right? They had to cultivate mental fortitude, discipline, and focus, so that they could stay concentrated on the battlefield, and that they would not just panic on the battlefield and then just like perish in the war. So Zen was quite important to them because of that. So this is Kōtoku-in, a temple renowned for its bronze statue of Amitabha Buddha. The statue was built in the mid-13th century and it was originally housed indoors in a large wooden hall. But the hall was destroyed by a tsunami in 1498, and it's been out in the open ever since. You can clearly see the greenish-blue patina caused by all the oxidation of the bronze over the years. The Great Buddha stands at 13 meters tall, and it's one of the largest outdoor Buddha statues in Japan. And surprisingly, the statue is hollow, and people can actually enter from the back and view the interior. But unfortunately, there's some graffiti and traces of vandalism inside the structure. There's a beautiful Japanese proverb that says, "Ao wa wakare no hajime." To meet is to part. Every encounter eventually leads to separation. And this is basically the Buddhist concept of impermanence, and the Japanese call it mujo. That all things are transient, and that every beginning holds within it the seed of an ending. All that live will surely die, and all that meet will surely separate. So this place is called Yanaka Cemetery. It covers an area of around 26 acres, I believe. So that's like 20-ish football fields. And all the people, like all the prominent figures in Japanese history are buried here. You know, so all the politicians, musicians, poets, actors, physicians, they're all buried here. And as far as I know, there are 7,000 graves here at this place. And it makes you wonder that all these people have been alive at one point in time. All these people, they lived and loved and dreamed and struggled. They had their own stories to tell, they walked their own journeys, but at the end of the day, destiny comes for all of us. We're all destined to return back to the ground. I think people misinterpret Buddhism as this pessimistic, nihilistic religion because of our constant emphasis on death and our no-nonsense views on the ultimate dissolution of our mind and body. But I feel like we're not talking about mortality that much. I mean, it's understandable, you know, it's not something that you casually bring up at a family table and expect people to be okay with you. Death is painful, separation is painful, loss is painful. But I think we're quite flawed in the sense that we think that things last, like we deceive ourselves into thinking that things last, but they don't. We're just impermanent beings navigating this impermanent world, chasing after impermanent things. And I think once we truly know and can comprehend and can grasp mortality and impermanence, that our minds and bodies are impermanent, and that when it's time to leave, we're not going to take anything and we're not going to take anyone with us. And I think if you can actually grasp this concept, I think life gets easier. And I think if people can really understand that, we could end wars. Like, we could stop inflicting so much suffering onto others and onto ourselves. We could stop this cycle of hatred and oppression and violence and conflict and all that. And just imagine how peaceful the world would be. So today I'm visiting two museums here in Tokyo, the Tokyo National Museum and the Matsuoka Museum. I'm really surprised that Tokyo houses such an extensive collection of Buddhist art from Gandhara. So Gandhara was an ancient region which is now in present-day Pakistan and Afghanistan. It flourished from the 1st to 5th century, and one of the most important roles that Gandhara played was in the spread of Buddhism, especially to Central Asia, China, and Southeast Asia. But what really sets this region apart is its Greco-Buddhist art. This fascinating blend of Hellenistic and Buddhist artistic styles began shortly after Alexander the Great conquered the region in the 4th century BCE. And one of the greatest innovations of Gandhara was how artists began to depict the Buddha in human form. Before that, Buddhist art often used symbols like footprints or wheels to represent the Buddha, but Gandharan artists were the first to give him a tangible human figure, often with features resembling Greek gods. What makes Gandharan sculptures stand out is the material. They were carved out of this metamorphic rock called grey schist, and schist, when carved, holds the fine details really well. So it was ideal for Gandharan artists to incorporate delicate elements like flowing robes and facial expressions into the sculpture. You can really see the Greek influence in the draped robes and coat hair of the Buddha and Bodhisattvas, including the contrapposto pose, as seen in Michelangelo's David. So, I read a very interesting poem a couple of months back, and whenever I see a body of water like, the river or a bay or the ocean, it reminds me of this poem. I'm not sure if it's attributed to Osho or Khalil Gibran, but it went something like this. The river needs to take the risk of entering the ocean because only then will fear disappear. Because that's when the river will know that it's not about disappearing into the ocean, but becoming the ocean. Impermanence is everywhere. I see it in every person, every place, every object. It's terrifying, really, because it's especially evident when you're meditating. Like when I'm meditating, if I concentrate enough, I could clearly see that everything that has arisen has passed away, everything that is arising is passing away, and everything that will arise will also pass away. So that begs the question, if nothing is permanent, if nothing is ever ours to hold on to grasp, to cling on to, if everything is just conditioned, from the universe down to the smallest atom, then is there something that is not conditioned, that is not subject to death and decay, not subject to pain and loss and separation? There is. And that's where the Four Noble Truths come in, which is a central teaching in Buddhism. So basically, the first noble truth is that life is suffering. The second noble truth is that there is an origin to suffering. And the third noble truth is that there is an end, a cessation to suffering. And the final truth is that there is a path leading to the cessation of suffering, and that is the Noble Eightfold Path. I have a lot to say about love, and one of them is that love is simply not sustainable. It's just not designed to last. I mean, heartbreak is a universal experience. It's not just confined to your spouse, your partner, or your boyfriend. It applies to everybody. It could be your friends, your family, your relatives. And I just find it so strange and so sad and upsetting that, your significant other can one day go from your only one to just someone. I've come to realize what love is and what it isn't. Because modern love, by definition, as far as my experience can tell, it's always bound by some degree of attachment, some degree of possessiveness, or ownership and ego. I think we need to love people selflessly. Like, we need to love and give without expecting anything in return, but that's just not how society works nowadays. I think love, in a sense, is inherently selfish. I mean, think about it. If somebody doesn't satisfy your needs anymore, that if you can't find yourself in that person, or that person can no longer provide your needs, then why stay? And I think that's the reason why it hurts so much when you lose somebody that you love, because you lose a part of yourself in the process because of how much you see yourself in them. In order for you to lose people, they must first belong to you. But the thing is, we don't belong to anybody. Nobody belongs to us. So I like to think of love as borrowing people rather than owning them. In time, we have to return them. We have to return everybody and everything that we love. I don't think love exists to make you happy. It exists to show you how much you can endure its fragility. For as long as I can remember, I've been searching for something. Not happiness, not love, not wealth, but a path. A way to understand suffering, impermanence, and the nature of existence itself. We spend our lives chasing so many things, but the more we grasp, the more they slip through our fingers. So what does it mean to let go? To truly see things as they are, not as we wish them to be. This journey has only begun, and already I find myself questioning, reflecting, unlearning. And I'm gonna keep searching. This is just the beginning. The path doesn't end here. I don't know where it will take me next, but I can't wait to see what more wisdom it has to offer.